Hey everybody, we're back with another cold hardy citrus taste test. And in today's video, we're featuring two of probably the most useful cold hardy citrus for the kitchen, because we essentially have a direct lemon and lime substitute here. So this is exciting because both of these options I believe to be similarly hardy, so probably somewhere in the vicinity of a zone 8, maybe a very warm zone 7. But both of these seem to be good to around, well, at least 8 degrees or so, but probably in that 5 to 10 degree range, probably pushing more on the 10 degree side, but I have seen reports of these surviving some pretty good temperatures, so not entirely sure, but Citremon here, this is a lemon and trifoliate orange hybrid. So this is a 50-50 hybrid with a trifoliate orange, and I gotta give it credit where it's due. It is very good for having that kind of parentage. As for the Carolina lime here, this actually isn't a true lime. This is some sort of clementine and trifoliate hybrid, whether it's a 50-50 or whether it's, got maybe 75% true citrus and 25% pond citrus. We're not exactly sure on the distribution, but it seems similar to, I believe it's called Clem Tri-Clem, where it's some sort of clementine trifoliate backcross with clementine. So it could be something like that, but the plants on, the leaves on Citremon are very trifoliate, but they're big and broad, just like a lemon would be. Whereas with the Carolina lime, the leaves are a lot narrower, thicker, and darker, and they're mostly unifoliate, maybe a little bifoliate. You don't get a whole lot of trifoliate leaves on Carolina lime. But something interesting too, is I have these fruits that I was slicing open for some pictures, and Citremon comes in two forms. You have this kind of pumpkin form, sometimes it even gets these fingers and looks more like a Buddha's hands, and then you have this more standard round form, which actually I believe tends to be less common on the tree. But the differences are, this form is generally seedless, so it's just straight juice in there, but there's a little less juice, it's a little lighter, a little more rind and everything. This tends to have a little more juice, but also more seeds. And it's generally a denser fruit and a smaller one. But the Carolina lime is pretty consistent. It's a very standard looking citrus. However, it can vary slightly in size. So some of these slightly larger ones are a little more mandarin size. And then some are a little smaller, a little bit more like you would expect from a lime. So we are going to weigh these all first before I show you the beautiful look inside of these. These fruit really excite me because if you do live in like that zone 8 or warm zone 7, this could be a really good option for you because I have had these before. So re-reviewing these, we're going to give these some measurements and figure out an actual score for these fruit. But I really like both of these. These are some of my favorite hardy citrus here. So we'll kind of get a rough average here between these different size fruit I have. Carolina lime, the first one, comes in at 126, and our second one is coming in at 81. So it's probably going to be in the ballpark of like a 100-gram average, which is a pretty medium fruit. It's not exceptionally small. Some of them can be a little smaller, but still not terribly small. It was actually hard to find a whole lot of smaller fruit. Most of them were, really in between these two, which isn't bad at all, kind of clementine size or so. But then for the Citremon, the round form, we have 75 grams. And then for our kind of Buddha's hand looking one, we have 56. So, let's see, I'm sorry, that's more like 57, but 75, we'll just kind of correct that there. So probably more in the ballpark of like 65 grams or so. I'd say that's kind of heading more towards a small fruit, based on how we tend to rate these. It could be bordering medium, but it is a smaller fruit than Carolina lime. On average, they're about the size of the smaller Carolina limes, or a bit smaller. We can get that out of the way. And now let's show you the inside of these. And this is pretty interesting. I might cut up all 4 fruits just to show you the insides of everything. But here are the ones we sliced already. So we have the round form of Citremon and the smaller Carolina lime, and I can smell them already. Look at that. I love this right here, because if this doesn't convince you, I don't know what would. You can't smell this through the video right now, but they smell really good, and they look so convincing. This looks more like a lime than dragon lime does to me. Off the top of my head, it's hard to think if there's any other. Well, like Thomasville's another hardy lime substitute. That one kind of looks a little key lime-ish when you're picking it at that stage. I guess Yuzu picked green can also be a decent lime substitute. There are some options here, but out of all of them, this one was probably one of the most convincing. As you smell it just right off the bat, it has like an interesting like limey mandarin smell to it, almost like a sweet limey smell, which that kind of hints towards the flavor there. For the Citremon, you do get that lemon, and it's like a hint of trifoliate, but it presents itself differently with Citremon. And this is something where I've described in past reviews. There's something slightly herbal, not quite in a medicinal way, but more in like a rosemary type of way, or like something you would add to dishes, something you would cook with. Yeah, it's very interesting. Rosemary isn't quite exactly where it is, but it's kind of like has like a lemon and herb smell. But let's cut open the others just so you can see. We'll just have a little lemon and lime party here. We'll get across all of here. And yeah, I don't think there's any seeds in this one. Just to show you the difference, look at that. Seedless. So that's the interesting thing about Citremon. And the score that we're going to give it on the seeds really depends on which fruit you pick. No matter what, the seeds aren't bad in the normal one, but otherwise it's completely seedless. So that's going to be tricky for me to rate, but I'm probably going to rate it on the lower end where it's like it has a few seeds to none. It really depends. Most of the fruit are like that, so I'm probably going to bias the score towards the seedless fruit, but just interesting because the seeded fruit does kind of have like a darker color in there that could be related to ripeness too. But yeah, not a bad amount of seeds and a good amount of juice in there. But you can see there's no juice on the cutting board when I slice that open. Both of these fruit are not excessively juicy. And then for our Carolina lime, we'll just cut open the big one too, so we get a good view inside that. Just see if there's a difference. Maybe it's more or less green, just to show a little variability between the fruit. That one got a little juice out, actually. And there you go. You can see that one's actually a little bit lighter, but not too bad, honestly. I think even when these are picked, because you can see they kind of ripen towards like a yellowy color that starts coming in, these still retain a good bit of their green color, which I love. I think that's really eye-catching to have such a green fruit that also functions as a lime substitute. I mean, obviously visually is a big component, so if it looks like a lemon or looks like a lime, we're probably going to taste and believe that more too. But truly, this one sells that lime appearance, and we're going to double check, but in my experience, it has delivered that lime taste too. But just fascinating to see that color. And this is one where I'd be curious to back cross this with trifoliate orange and attempt to make a much hardier version. So kind of imagine in my head a trifoliate orange with the green flesh that has more of a lime flavor to it, which would provide utility because standard trifoliate orange has more of like a lemon orange flavor, sometimes like lemon grapefruit, and you get pine flavors and things like that. But I imagine this back crossed so it's much hardier could create something interesting. We don't know for sure. But in terms of seeds, Carolina lime is not too shy when it comes to seeds, but it doesn't produce a ton either. It's kind of on the moderate side. slightly below average with the moderate. Probably somewhere around like a 4 is what I'm going to say. I'll compare with others and see, but I'd put it probably around there. So, in terms of, well, you know what? We do have to try the zest too. Maybe let's get that out of the way. So, we'll take the zest off of a nice yellow part of the Citremon here. I actually forget if the zest is really usable on these. It might be. Let's get a sniff of that. Yeah, you get a little more trifoliate smell with that, but interesting, there's something else in there. Yeah, kind of similarly, you get like a citrusy, but more like herbal smell to that. So we'll take a little taste of that. It's not bad. It's not excessively bitter. Even as I'm kind of waiting for it to kick in, it's not hitting nearly as hard as you'd expect. But it does have some. It's more bitter than a normal lemon would be, and it's not quite as lemony as a normal one would be. It's kind of like medium quality. I wouldn't say it's like a super high quality zest by any means, but it's not bad. It's not overly bitter. It has some interesting notes to it. I don't know if you could use that directly as a lemon zest substitute. Let me see. It kind of functions differently. I feel like you would use it in different things than you would use lemon zest in. But I haven't tried that either. I think when we've made desserts with Citremon, which by the way is really good, because it does taste like a lemon then, we've mostly just used the juice, because that's the more convincing part. Now, as for the zest on the Carolina lime, again, it's not really a true lime, so we'll see if this tastes limey at all. It does have a pretty thin rinds there. Oh wow, that smells convincing. That smells like a lime. Yeah, Carolina lime is one of those things. It's funny that Stan names it that, but it's really very lime-like for not. I don't think it has lime in its bloodline, but let's taste this. You know what? That zest is better than the Citremon, and it actually tastes limey. That's probably one of the first hardier hybrids where not only is the zest not bitter, which is surprising even for some normal citrus, but that tastes convincingly like lime. That might be one of the first ones here. I haven't had a lot that have rated highly here. I'm gonna have to give that a high quality. It smells and tastes like a lime zest, and it's not bitter. I mean, I can't not give that a good rating, you know? That's really good, wow. Like, I didn't even need to wash that down, really. So let's see, in terms of peelability here. I mean, these fruit they're all pretty thin, but you know what? That kind of separates, you know what, that separates better than you'd expect. Oh, fruit down. Okay, so you know what? It's like not quite as peelable as Sacaton was, which surprised me that day, but look at that, it really separates. I mean, that's pretty cool. I don't know if you could see that very clearly. Get that focus there. You can see all the little vesicles and everything. That came off decently. It's not easy to peel, but it's not hard to peel either. You know, it just takes a little bit of effort, but that's easier than you would expect for sure. Wow, okay. So we could try Citremon now. Just move these out of the way. If we try and give that a little something. I mean, it kind of peels too. It's harder though. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. And when it comes to this form, much harder. Because you end up just like, you could probably just rip this fruit apart. Yeah, as I thought. You just rip this fruit apart, in between those folds there. It just kind of separates easier. That's interesting though. So I wouldn't call that quite as peelable. That wasn't the hardest either. You know, it's not like on the level of like a trifoliate or a conestoga or anything like that. So we will still say it's like hard to peel, but on the higher end of harder to peel. It's not impossible, but Carolina lime is fairly peelable actually. Now in terms of juice, these are both kind of medium. Carolina lime's a little higher. So tentatively, I'd probably give Citremon around like I'll say like a 4 to a 5, where Carolina lime's probably pushing more like a 6. But again, all of these will be double checked before I post the scores, because sometimes I could use relative measurements and compare these to what we've rated other ones before. And if it's very similar or a little bit more, that gives me a better frame of reference there. But now the fun part, let's get into tasting these. Enough staring at these fruit. I want to try again. So maybe I'll go the Citremon first, which will just make sure we don't cut into anything crazy there. I'll get 2 slices, because usually by the first one, I'm paying attention to, or my attention's too split between too many things, so I don't always capture all of it on the first one. But let's get a good bite of Citremon here and figure out everything. Oh yeah. It's not bad at all. Again, this is probably one of the best hearty lemon substitutes. I haven't had the privilege of trying an I-Chang lemon yet, but I'm sure that's pretty up there too. It's probably better than this, honestly, but for having trifoliate in its bloodline, is probably the best lemon substitute of those hybrids. Which makes sense, it's directly crossed with the lemon. Yeah, it's a good lemon taste. Slight bitterness at the end. So like slight or like little bitterness, but it is there. You do still get it. And I'm a little more accustomed to the bitterness, so people who aren't used to bitterness in their fruits or their foods might be a little more turned off by that. But it's not bad. And in a juice form, you wouldn't be able to tell once it's diluted with sugar. Like if you made a lemonade out of this, you wouldn't be able to tell. Sourness is actually moderate. It's not as sour as you think it would be. It's almost on the level of a Meyer lemon. And you know, the only thing I'm noticing, which I remember, this scores high with the trifoliateness. More so when it's ripe, but this does have a bit of sticky resin, which not a lot of these do. A lot of the 50-50 hybrids have greatly reduced amounts of that resin, but I do get it a little more with this one, where in terms of biting into this, where you tend to get a lot more of that gumminess, like if I was biting into a trifoliate, I would have that resin on my teeth. I got a little bit of it with this one. So that's a slight detractor from that. But in terms of sweetness, it's got some. It's not a lot, but there's some. Again, I'd compare it to a Meyer lemon, like slightly less sweet than a Meyer lemon, but in terms of sourness and lemon flavor, I mean, Meyer lemons do taste better. They have a little more of that mandarin taste in them, which this does not. But it's quite good. Again, if knowing the parents of this is what makes this even more impressive, you know. As it ranks compared to other lemons, of course, it's hard to get something that's like a Eureka or a Lisbon lemon and also be able to grow it down to like 8 degrees or so. Any normal lemon would be long dead by then. So it's impressive. The taste is impressive for the hardiness. But I'll say moderate or so on the trifoliateness. It's really just in terms of that slight bit of bitterness and stuff. In terms of appearance and everything, it doesn't look nearly the same as one. I mean, you could tell there's that influence, but it's quite different. Edibility, though, I'd say it's pretty darn edible. It is not a bad lemon substitute at all. I'm just going to put edible for now. I'll figure out where to rate that exactly, but that's perfectly fine, honestly. And I think one day I want to grow these for a farmer's market because I think these would be super cute to display in the fall. Have these little pumpkin lemons and actually be able to use them like lemons. And I think the flavor is approachable for normal people. Like if you were, I always recommend this with like chicken and rosemary and things like that. If you're using it to cook with or use with herbs, it fits perfect. It has this taste, which we ought to describe now. I always call it like an exotic lemon taste, you know, or like an herbal lemon. We'll articulate that a little better, but yeah, you get herbal taste, you get like this complex lemon flavor, you get a slight bit of sweetness, little bitterness on the finish. But if you told me this was just a lemon from a different part of the world and people cook with it, you know, doing XYZ, I'd believe it. Yeah, the aroma, it's honestly kind of similar to the flavor. You do get a bit more piney floral notes. Now, in terms of uses, this one you can use for a lot. I mean, just for example, lemonade, so like juice, tea, jelly. We've made desserts with it, like pie. It's like a key lime pie, something like that. Sorbet, like a lemon sorbet. It's a pretty good lemon substitute, so the uses go on for quite a while. But it's a very versatile fruit. You know what? Let me just get a little taste of the normal one. I know this is probably going to taste the same, but just in case. Yeah, pretty similar. That one's maybe slightly more acidic, but it could just be related to its ripeness. But they're both very good at this stage. Be it dimpled or not. It should be interesting germinating those seeds too. I haven't had a whole lot of luck germinating Citremon or getting it to survive on its own roots from seed. But another year, we will try. So now, let's get into our Carolina lime. This one, I'm very excited to try again. Get some nice slices there. It's just a beautiful fruit. I love this fruit. It is like one of my favorites, and I'm pretty sad this year. I only propagated a single tree. I had maybe 2 or 3, but some of the grafts weren't looking too hot. I'm going to propagate a lot more of these. Probably not for sale this year. Maybe next year, but Stan has his tree, and I'm sure he's willing to share fruit and seeds from his as well. But yeah, this is one I definitely want to have a lot more of, and I will propagate in the future, but we're talking more like 2 years from now when we'd have these available. Let me just cleanse my palate. All right, try and reset there for the Carolina lime. Yeah, I love this fruit. Quite juicy, really nice appearance there with these slices. Let me see if I can get focus on that. Beautiful there. All right, let's take a bite. Wow. It just hits you right off the bat. And my wife and I agreed. She actually really liked this one. And for those of you who don't know, I use her as a reference to know whether or not these fruits suck. You know, speaking simply, because some fruit I might find are okay, or even a little more than okay. I might think they're even good, but she might not. And she's more sensitive to off flavors in fruit and these trifoliate piney flavors and all the weird things that you can get in these fruit that are crossed with trifoliate. People have different tolerances of it. And given that she's more sensitive to it, it's perfect because I'm kind of deconditioned to these flavors now. Like, or I should say, I'm conditioned to these flavors. I'm used to them. They don't bother me as much, even if I can still recognize when they're there. But it's good to have someone who can recognize them and doesn't like them. So when a fruit is actually quite good, I know it's quite good. And I know that people might find this very interesting. But I'm trying to say this is one of them. She really liked this fruit, and we agreed this tasted like a sweet lime, basically. Or a sweeter lime. Sweet might be an overstatement, but sweeter lime has a fascinating taste. I'm going to go in for some more. It's so good. And what I love about it, because it's a little sweeter, it's like a lime that you can eat out of hand. And personally, I hate sweet limes. At least the ones I've had were like insipid. They were just sweet, no acidity. I really didn't like them. But this still has acidity. It's actually approaching like balanced. It's still biased towards being sour, but it's only a moderate sourness. And compared to Citremon, it's definitely like at least a -1. It's less sour than Citremon. Bitterness is very little. Very. I mean, maybe not very. Because the thing is, it still has that limey bitterness, but not as strong as a normal lime. Maybe that contributes to the sourness feeling toned down too, because you're not smacked quite as hard, but you get such a interesting lime taste. It almost tastes like, to me, if you mixed a lime or even a lime quat with a, not 50-50 with the mandarin, but you get like a hint of mandarin in there. Almost in the type of mandarin taste, and this is where you could tell it has a teeny bit of trifoliate in it. It almost tastes similar to like a US 852 crossed with a lime, but more like a lime. So that type of hearty mandarin taste, that citrandarin taste, is a small component, and then lime is the rest of it. It's like literally, if I'm describing this, it's like lime and citrandarin. It's very interesting. And it makes sense though, because this isn't a true lime. It's got clementine in it, which I believe a lot of clementine and trifoliate type of crosses tend to come out green like this, which is very interesting. Maybe someone knows better than me. I don't know why that happens, but I think it's really cool. And I think it's really cool that somehow it brought out some lime flavors. I think sometimes color and flavor are pretty closely linked together, depending on some of the compounds that are in these fruit. Maybe that's the case with this one. But sweetness, it's like fairly sweet. Again, it's got enough acidity to kind of tone it down a bit, but this is surprisingly edible out of hand. If you can eat sour citrus easily, like if you could eat lemons and limes, this is candy right here. This is really good. Wow. I could just eat that for a whole video. Such an interesting taste. Edibility is very edible, in my opinion. But we did think this was one of the best ones. This is approaching like, I might even say it's approaching like Taiwanica lemon, where in terms of being a lime substitute, those two are both very good. Citremon is still very good, but Carolina lime's even better for what it's supposed to be, or what we want it to be. But kind of same thing for the aroma we'll put here. It really is just like a lime with like a hint of mandarin. And like a slight bit of maybe floral notes. You don't really get a whole lot of like piney smell. Yeah, not at all. It's a refreshing smell from these. It's very interesting. But let's grab some here. Get kind of some of these peels off. Let's get some testing going on. So we're going to test the bricks and the pH. Again, when it comes to these pH test strips, we're going to test more thoroughly with our pH meter here. But these should read below a 3, most probably. And I think Citremon will read a little lower between the two. Because I think Carolina Lime either has a lower acid content or a higher sugar content, or both. I'm not quite sure, but we'll get the Carolina Lime squeezed on one. Just to see what it changes to. You never know when one of these might be like slightly different than I expect. Alright, so we got our Citremon and our Carolina Lime. Both looking the same so far, so probably coming in at a 3, which we figured. But now, I'm excited to see the bricks readings on these. So we have our bricks refractometer there. We're going to get a nice squeeze of this juice from the Carolina Lime. Wow, that juice is very clear too. It's one of the first where it's like hard to tell it's on there. A lot of these come out with so much pulp. I mean, at least when I was doing the Citramellos and the Trifoliates, that was definitely more noticeable on there. And yeah, you know what, the bricks comes in surprisingly low for Carolina Lime. But again, I don't know if that's more related to the sugar or all the other stuff that tends to be in these fruit. But it comes in at a solid 8. So we got an 8 for the bricks there, so it might just be lower acid than Citremon, which is interesting. And now we'll get a squeeze of the Citremon, which maybe I'll get from this one because it's seedless. And this one's actually also relatively clear too. I mean, both these fruits are definitely some of the better ones we've tested, for sure. And that comes in at a 9. So one higher than Carolina Lime. And both of them are reading about a 3. Let's see. Yeah, they're quite similar. I almost wonder if Carolina Lime's reading is one of those ones where it looks slightly different, but it's probably the same. So we're going to say they're both around a 3, but you will see the final score, and I will find out shortly after this. I just have to squeeze the juice into a small jar to actually measure these with that pH meter. But let's finish up some thoughts here on the Citremon and the Carolina Lime. Okay. So, here we go. As you can tell, and you know what? Maybe now's a good time to pop up those scores, right? These are both really good lemon and lime substitutes for their hardiness. Again, I think we can get away with growing both of these here. I only have one Carolina Lime, so it's in our unheated greenhouse for protection. But I do have a couple Citremon outside. And I might even put one in the greenhouse, depending, just to protect it. I'm not entirely sure, because again, we're supposed to be like we're an 8A where I live, but historically it was a 7B. Recent winters are definitely zone 8 winters, but occasionally you can get a snap that is definitely, zone 7 type of minimum temperatures. But the freezes here are short-lived, so I think both of these can get by here. So, if you live in the Carolinas or lower, depending if you're in a citrus quarantine state or not, but even parts of Virginia can maybe get away with both of these. I'm not sure if Virginia Fruit Grower has grown or is growing Citremon. I think he's growing Carolina Lime, and he's grown like Clem Triclem, and that's succeeded over there. So I think this one stands a chance as far as Virginia, and Citremon may stand a chance up to there. But given that it has lemon in its genetics, lemon isn't particularly cold hardy, so that is a limiting factor for it. They're both very cold hardy, but if you're trying to push these in a colder zone 7 or a zone 6, they're probably still out of question. You still would have to provide a lot of protection if you want to grow these. So say they're good down to 8 degrees, and you live in an area that can get to 0 or a little below 0. You might still have to cover these with plastic, wrap some Christmas lights around them, put a big water barrel next to them, something. I mean, you could try more passive methods where you don't have to use electricity, and it may still work. And honestly, they're very productive. Carolina lime was loaded this year, but it seems to be somewhat alternate bearing. At least Stan's tree was, where last year it didn't produce quite as many or any fruit to my knowledge, but that could also be related to late freezes too, which is something to look out for as well. If your plant starts waking up and then it freezes, you could lose those blooms. I know that can be a problem with Citremon too, where I know Stan's tree one of the years lost a lot of fruit because of that, and just the fruit at the very bottom near the ground, those were the ones that actually set because it was a little warmer. But these would definitely be zone pushing in some areas. But I think for us, we might just be in that comfortable zone where we can grow these confidently. But yeah, these are really high quality. Well, I should say relatively high quality. This one almost I could see in a grocery store though, just as a new fruit for people to try. It's like a different kind of lime. You can't go in expecting a normal lime, of course, but even if you are, you'd be like, wow, there's like a sweeter lime maybe. I mean, this will make a fantastic limeade, a very tasty one. And this makes a very good lemonade. We've made it before. We've made lemon pie with this. It's very good, but I say it's more of a farmer's market fruit because the taste still is different. And it's more that appearance that really gets you too. It's a fun like novelty item when you get this particular form. Of course, the rounder form just looks like a normal citrus for the most part. It's nothing too crazy, but then you get the seeds as well. So pros and cons with that, but pretty amazing you can get a seedless lemon in some pretty cold areas just because of this weird, I don't know if mutation is the right word, but when the fruit form like this, they're generally seedless. So you get seedless lemons, in the Carolinas. That's pretty awesome, because even if we perfected a lot of these trifoliate hybrids and these cold hardy citrus hybrids, seediness is always an issue. I don't mind seediness. I like growing the seeds anyway, but I find that a lot of fruit, because they're not being bred for seedlessness, tend to taste better anyway, if that's just the focus, is refining the taste as much as you can, and the seeds aren't really too important to me. But to some people, that's a big turnoff, so it's one of the next things that would have to be worked on for these fruit is the seeds, and there's certainly not a lack of those. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. That's enough rambling about hardy citrus for one day, but this was a fun one. I really liked these fruit. Maybe some of you have tried these too, and if you haven't, you got to get your hands on one. Unfortunately, I can't help you with that this year. Most likely, we'll grow out these seeds, and if we have some decent seedlings, I may keep a lot for myself anyway, because if I see any variation in this, any that look a little more trifoliate, I'm probably going to keep them because I want a hardier version of this. But we may have some extras that look a little more true to the parent, in which case I will post them probably on our website or eBay, something like that. But that wouldn't be until probably late spring at least. But in the meantime, Stan has these fruit right now. He's got plenty of material as well. His trees are big and healthy, so if you ever just wanted a cutting from him, you can give him a call, and I'm sure he'd help you out. I actually even saw he has rooted Citremon cuttings. And actually, Madison Citrus Nursery, if they're still carrying it, also has Citremon. But as far as I'm aware, not many sources of Carolina lime, and this was definitely the superior fruit here. Excellent, sweeter lime substitute. So we'll try and make that one more available with time. But thank you guys as always for tuning in, and I will see you next time.